Hey everyone, welcome back. Episode 7 of Nervous Breakdowns with G, the podcast that examines mental health related issues from the standpoint of a counselor. My name's Gino. I'm a nationally certified counselor. I have master's degrees in clinical and counseling psychology. This week I wanted to discuss an issue that I think is kind of unique in counseling. As a counselor, and I think many people in the health field or the human services fields can relate to this, I'm in a unique position where my professional development and my personal development are really closely tied. And what do I mean by that? In counseling, it's important for me to be non-judgmental. It's important for me to be accepting of my clients. It's important for me not to bring my own shit into the sessions. Because of that, I really need to make sure that before I sit down with somebody, I have a good grip on what's going on with me. What does that mean? Does that mean if I have biases? Am I sitting down with somebody who maybe is coming to me for help with something that I don't agree with? I don't personally treat sex offenders, but many counselors do treat sex offenders. They have to make that right for themselves. They have to come to grips with the idea that they don't like the fact that their client has done awful things to other people, but they're there to help that person. Do I have biases against a person's lifestyle, or do I have thoughts? We see this coming up a lot when we see very religious counselors who have very strong thoughts about homosexuality, for example, and they're asked to treat homosexual clients. There was a case recently where I believe the American Counseling Association refused to sanction a counselor in training who didn't want to treat homosexual clients because it was against her religion, and went to court. It was a big deal. So, as I was saying, I have to very often make sure that my professional and personal selves line up. And in most cases, they do. In most cases, I'm able to be a genuine person when I sit in my sessions. And I find that as I get better at this field, as I get more and more experience, I become more and more me in the session. I'm not playing the role of counselor. I'm me who happens to be a counselor. And this is increasing my effectiveness. I find myself being a much better therapist to my clients. But there is the occasion that comes up where the counselor version of myself and the me version of myself disagree. And when that happens, I have to spend some time. It's my duty and it's my ethical responsibility to figure that out, to straighten it out and find out why that is. And this week, one of these occasions arose, and that's what I want to talk about this show. In the news lately, this past week, and I think last week also, has been a lot about Jonathan Martin. He's a former Dolphins lineman, a Miami Dolphins football player who basically quit the Miami Dolphins because he was being bullied by some of his teammates. And this has been up and down the news and has turned into kind of a greater issue about bullying and what we should do about bullying. And my conflict started this way. The part of me that's a counselor says, people shouldn't be bullied. That's it's traumatizing. It's not good for them. It hurts their feelings and it makes things uncomfortable for them. But then the part of me that's the kid that grew up in New York and was a victim of bullying and sees myself as kind of somebody who wasn't necessarily hurt by bullying as much as toughened by it, and it has served me in many ways, says, but wait, why should we protect people from things that are going to happen? Why is, in other words, this guy should toughen up. The part of me that's the kid from New York said, why doesn't this guy have to toughen up? Why are we making it okay for him to basically be a crybaby? So this is a drastic departure from my professional self, and I have to make that jive in order for me to move forward. I have to figure out, who's right. Is the counselor who wants to protect and help this person right, or is the person who says, toughen up and stop being a baby about it right? Because that person could be right. So it leads me to a greater issue of bullying. Okay, it seems like bullying has been in the news a lot lately. And the idea is that people should be protected, that bullying is bad, that people should be protected from it, that we shouldn't allow it to happen. Now, here's where my conflict comes in. Bad things happen. I mean, we live in a reality where no one is promised a life that's free of distress, that's free of pain, that's free of teasing. And I've experienced it myself. You know, I grew up in New York. I'm the only child of immigrants, okay? My parents not only are immigrants, which means they didn't really understand American culture, but they were old when they had me. So, like, when I was born, my dad was 50 already. My mom was not that old. My mom was 35. But they had, on top of a culture gap, almost like a generation gap. So I was being raised by a father who was the age of some of my friends' grandparents. And as a result, I didn't really fit in that much in school. You know, I when I went to grade school, I went to a Catholic school, and although as an Italian person, I'm clearly white. When you're sitting in a school full of people who are like Irish and German, and I'm the least white person there, not to mention the fact that my parents were blue collar workers, where my classmates' parents were attorneys and lawyers. You know, we were in private school. So my parents, I know now, probably were better off financially than some of their parents who worked at desks. But there was definitely like a class divide and a cultural divide where I would get teased for being, you know, overweight, for being different, and eventually, in a small class of 20 kids, I was always one of like the least popular 3 or 4 kids. Eventually, I talked my parents into letting me go to public school where I felt like I could fit in better. But boy, was I wrong. You know, in Catholic school, we wore uniforms, so I really didn't have a sense of like what style was. And when I got to school, in public school, and I had to wear my own clothes for the first time, I didn't realize that it wasn't that cool that your mom made some of your clothes. So I got to school and I got tormented mercilessly for basically dressing like a weenie. Then, you know, again, I'm Italian. My hair is thick and coarse and curly, and I didn't know what to do with it. You know, I never really thought to manage it. So I get to school and the kids are teasing me about my hair. And I go home and I complain to my mom, like, Mom, you know, the kids are making fun of me. She goes, oh, Gino, you know Woody about it. And she takes my hair and then proceeds, like the morning of school, proceeds to brush it vigorously, right? Now, if you guys have curly hair, you know what that does, okay? But for those of you that don't, when you take hair that's curly and coarse and you brush the shit out of it, you basically turn it into a big cotton ball, okay? I mean, so she sent me to school with a big brown cotton ball head. And I get to school and the kids could not stop laughing. They would sit and, you know, throw things in my hair and like stick pens in it without me knowing. I'd be walking around school with a pen sticking out of my hair. I mean, ridiculous. So I am no stranger to kind of being teased and messed with. And what happens is, I think that when you're exposed to this, a couple of things can happen. You know, either you can, especially if it's your child, you can either try to put a bubble around that kid and protect them, right? And take them away and go to the teachers and make the teachers stop everything and everybody should leave this kid alone, okay? Or you could help the kid develop the internal resources to stand up to that, all right? Now, this is what I think is my central issue, you know, with the idea of bullying. And it's not so much that the idea of bullying. Look, bullying's bad, right? I mean, nobody wants to be treated poorly, and certainly when bullying gets to the point of where it's physical and people are getting beat up, look, that stuff shouldn't happen, okay? But when somebody is being treated as an outcast by their peers, I think the worst thing you can do is to throw that bubble around them and basically allow them to accept the victim role. You know, when I was being teased by my classmates, I would go home and my mom would do a couple of things. My mom and dad would say, look, first of all, don't pay attention to those dummies at school. They're stupid. They don't know what they're talking about. Okay? And second of all, what are you talking? Look at your hair. You're beautiful. When you get older, you're gonna be so happy that you have that hair. And by the way, now that I know how to manage it properly, I am. I'm 35 years old. My hair is as thick as the day I was, a teenager. So I ain't losing this. In fact, I got too much hair. But anyway, so what they did was they gave me some counterpoints. They said, look, that's what those kids are telling you. Here's some competing information, and you can make a decision about what you think is right. And furthermore, we love you. We care about you, and you're always going to be safe here. Okay? So what they did was they helped me shore up my defenses. They taught me indirectly. I mean, my parents weren't counselors, but they were very bright and healthy, emotionally healthy people. And they taught me, look, here's a counterpoint. First of all, consider the source of the person that's telling you this. Some dummy from school that you don't even care about, right? Consider what they're telling you. They're teasing you because you have too much hair. Everybody wants hair. The hair is beautiful. Everybody likes it, okay? And secondly, none of it matters because you're important to us, all right? These are huge, huge psychological advantages to have, and they're ones that you can generalize, okay? Those tools, considering the source, considering the validity of the criticism, and then trying to put it into a framework. So what, the kids at school are teasing you, who gives a damn? You're happy, you have a nice home here, you have a family that cares about you. These are the things that you can generalize to work, right? Like, I'm at work now, and believe me, I've dealt with bullies at work or people that have treated me poorly, and I use basically the same tools. So-and-so says that I'm bad at my job. Well, who are they? Right? So I for the first thing I do is I evaluate the source. Who are they? They're not my boss. My boss says I do a great job. They're a dunce that I deal with at work, and who knows what they know. I consider the actual criticism. I can take a look at what I'm being told and either evaluate it. If it's true, I can do something about it. If it's not, I'll dismiss it. And then I think about the overall picture. I have a family at home. I'm happy with my life in general. And if somebody's teasing me at work, it's such a small percentage of my day, I'm not even going to let it bother me. But what you do is you have developed a set of defenses from an early age that you can apply and generalize, right? And what we're really talking about is the idea of the old saying, you can teach a man to fish or you can give him a fish, right? If you give him a fish, he eats for a day. And if you teach him to fish, he eats for a lifetime. So what we have is a tendency, it looks like, to protect. And that tendency is the same thing as giving the person the fish. Because, yes, I can protect you from this bully now, right? But the next bully that comes along, I'm going to have to protect you again. And the next time, and there's going to come a time where I can't protect you. As opposed to giving you the tools, the internal resources to prevent or to defend yourself from bullies emotionally. So the conflict that I'm having is that I don't necessarily think that the way to help people that are being bullied is to stop the bullying. In fact, when we look at human beings in general, we see that we have something called resilience, right? We have the ability to adapt to stress, and stress makes us stronger. What do we mean? Well, think about it. We work out, right? When we work out, we cause our bodies to be stressed out. We make our lungs and heart work harder. We make our muscles, tear in microscopic ways. And when they repair themselves, we have to deal with the pain of being sore and of being uncomfortable. But when they repair themselves, they're stronger. Our heart pumps more blood. Our lungs can process more oxygen. Our muscles are stronger. In order to get better, to get stronger, to get more fit, we have to endure low-grade pain. Why is this different with bullying? How about other things? When we talk about just in general. Well, let me back up to the working out. So if I avoid pain with my body, what happens is I become sedentary, right? I become sedentary. My body actually breaks down. I think that we see this when we look at the way people are being protected. Children are being protected these days, where they're not allowed to feel the pain of loss, the pain of being picked on. We see children that come out and they don't have resilience. They come out and they're weak. They need to be coddled. I read an article in Time magazine some years ago about the millennial workforce, and I think it was Time magazine. I might be wrong, but the millennial workforce, where they had all of these kind of captains of business talking about the new wave of employees that are graduating college in 2005 and 2006, and these employees are children. Essentially, they were saying, we've never seen in 30 or 40 years of business employees that need this level of reinforcement. They need to constantly be directed what to do, and there's no independence, there's no self-drive. If there's not an immediate reward, there's no behavior. And think about that in the context of the parent of today, where we see sports games where children don't lose, right? There's no score kept. Or I have a friend that's a professor, and he says, and on the graduate level, mind you, I mean, he says, he's teaching 22 and 23-year-old master's students, and when they don't get an A, their parents call him and read him the riot act on their phone. At 22 and 23, you have your parents calling. I mean, you should be ashamed of yourself if you allow that. And as the parent, what do you think you're doing for that child? Do you think you're helping them? When I heard that, I was floored. I don't think my mom ever called a teacher. I think, if I failed an exam, my mom, I don't even think she knew my teacher's faces. She told me, well, you better study harder, son. If somebody was picking on me, she never went to the school. She told me to slap them or hit them back. In fact, when I was in grade school, this one kid would pick on me on the bus all the time, and I'd come home crying. My mom was like, "Look, just get him back." And eventually, I got to the breaking point. I think I choked the kid or something. I wasn't allowed on the bus anymore. But I'll tell you what, I never really got bullied after that. And furthermore, I learned a good lesson. What I learned is that, sometimes you take a short-term consequence. They made a big deal. Oh, this is on your permanent record. Who knows where that permanent record is now, right? When I was in grade school, that permanent record is probably in somebody's trash can or in a filing cabinet covered in dust right now. It's never affected me in terms of getting a job. But I tell you what, I did learn a lifelong lesson was that it feels pretty good to stand up for yourself. And when you do that, people tend to not mess with you that much. So it seems like there's a lot that happens, or there's a lot wrong with the way bullying is being handled, in my opinion. Right? Now, I also recognize that, to use the old cliche of the pendulum of change, right? When people realize that there's a problem, the pendulum starts to swing and change into the other direction. And more often than not, the pendulum can swing too much the other way, right, before it finds its center. And I think that's what we're experiencing here. We're experiencing a pendulum that's swinging, away from, again, nobody likes these situations where people get tormented to where they kill themselves, or people get treated so poorly that they feel bad and have suicidal thoughts. I mean, nobody wants that, right? But by the same token, I think there's a danger in swinging too much the other way, because if you put kids in a bubble where they can't experience stress, where they can't toughen up, they're going to do poorly in life, right? In a controlled environment like a school, you can make a kid pretty safe. Not 100% safe, but you have supervision most of the time, and I hope that your teachers are benevolent. They look out for kids. Again, not always, but in the majority of cases. But think about real life, okay? We have this guy, Jonathan Martin, who is a professional football player, and he is in a field, in a profession where aggression is the name of the game. Okay, you have massive men. Jonathan Martin, I think, is 6.5 feet tall and over 300 pounds, and he is a stud. He's a stallion. He's been a football player since he was in high school, played through college, and is just a massive mountain of a man whose job it is to push and move other men like him. All right. And this is not a nice, kind profession. They're smashing each other. They're throwing each other to the ground. So they are trained from a young age that aggression is the way to go. How does this guy not expect aggression in the locker room as well? These guys are not going to turn it off and be sensitive flowers in the locker room. Okay. And if they see weakness, they're going to exploit it. And the same thing is true in business. At the highest level of business, CEOs are sharks. They're savages, right? They will smash and crush people if they can for the smallest things. I mean, we see this. I'm not a huge fan of Donald Trump, but Donald Trump talks about his behavior in the boardroom. If he sees somebody push against him, he pushes against them back 10 times as hard, right? But that's the attitude that made him aggressive and made him successful. So when we have these attitudes and we in order to be successful, you have to be this kind of alpha, go get it type character. You're also going to have meanness, all right? And if you're to be successful, you must develop toughness, all right? Now, I did some research, and in the field of counseling, what we talk about is resilience, right? Resilience is the trait that allows people to bounce back from injury. It allows people to recover from trauma, to deal with stress, to deal with hardship. And this article I found really breaks down resilience into a couple of factors. And I think that it's important to know these factors because you can then know what to work on when you have somebody that's being bullied, right? If it's your child being bullied, somebody has done the work of breaking down what makes people deal with being bullied well, and you could work with them on it. For example, they find that people who are resilient have basically an almost constant understanding that setbacks and pain are a normal part of life. Now think about what that means, right? If you walk through your life, I talk a lot about automatic thoughts on this podcast, and you can go back and listen to a couple of times when I detail it in length. But one of the automatic thoughts that people sometimes have is that when they're in pain, it's unfair, right? And that's false. There's no such thing as fairness when it comes to pain. Pain is a central part of the life we live on. We all are born, we have pain, we have some happy times, and we die. Loss is a central, a central core part of our existence, and it's something that we deal with, okay? So when we walk through life and we have this automatic thought that when I feel pain and when people mistreat me, it's unfair, you're going to be disappointed a lot, all right? You're going to have a hard time dealing with that because you're going to get stuck on the unfairness of it, which is there's nothing you can do with it being unfair. Who do you go to if you're mistreated by a supervisor at work? Chances are you can't really go to anybody. I mean, you go to their supervisor, and then what happens? They put you in a room, and you guys have to talk it out. Again, it doesn't make it. You're not going to find a lot of satisfaction that way. So having the idea that setbacks and pain are normal puts you in a better headspace. Instead of playing this victim role, you're going to say, okay, I'm normal. I'm just like everybody else. I'm experiencing the pain and setbacks that people normally feel, and I'm going to get through this. Okay? That is another core part, is the idea that people who are resilient tend to think of themselves as survivors rather than victims. In other words, if I have a pain, or I have a loss, or I have an injury emotionally, I'm a survivor, which means this is a temporary thing. I'm going to learn how to deal with it, and I'm going to get through it and be normal once again. Somebody who perceives themselves as a victim has a sense that they are irreparably changed, that they have been changed in a way that's fundamental and that they can't recover from. And there's an acceptance that goes on of that role, of that victim role. If I've been changed in a way that I can't repair, then this is the new me. The new me is the person who, in my case, got picked on because of his hair, and I'm not as good as anybody else, and blah, 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 blah. I can't move from there. Once I've accepted that this is the new me, that's my new normal. And it's impossible to recover from when you accept that role. Another factor that people have who are resilient is what they call an internal locus of control. Now, that's basically a fancy word for, or a fancy term for, the idea that I can affect change in my life. That if I have a problem, I am the person who gets to make decisions and change that problem. If somebody is picking on me at work, or if I'm unhappy with my work situation, for example, if I have an external locus of control, which means I believe other people need to change in order for me to be happy, I'm going to focus on ways to make that person stop picking on me. And at the end of the day, that just may not be possible. My supervisor may be in very good with his supervisor. When I go to his supervisor, that person takes my boss's side, and I find myself in a worse situation than I was in before. Now, if I have that external locus of control, I feel helpless. Okay. Somebody with an internal locus of control says, okay, I'm not happy with this situation. How can I change it? I can look for another job. I can try to avoid my supervisor. I can change my behavior so my supervisor notices me less. But the idea is that the responsibility and the power to make change rests within me as opposed to within somebody else. That's crucial. That's such a crucial part of being a resilient person, because you're going to look for a solution that is something you can actually act on and you can feel in control of. And one of the last things is in resilience is social connection. The idea that I have a network of people around me that are on my side, as opposed to being isolated. When I deal with a problem, I'm not dealing with it alone. I'm dealing with it with this group of people that I have with me. So to come back to the idea of that I started this podcast with, which was the conflict that I have between my professional self, which says protect people, make sure that they don't feel pain, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and what I consider my true self, which is the guy who grew up that was a survivor of bullying and all this other stuff. I think that what I'm really experiencing trouble with is the way that people are treating bullying, which is to stop the bullying, rather than the idea of helping the bullied person shore up, helping them deal with the problem in an autonomous way. And when I bring it to that level, that is very consistent with some of the tenets of counseling. You know, in counseling, there's a bunch of basic ethical guidelines that we use, but one of the main ones is independence, right? Like, as a counselor, I'm not a very good counselor if I make my client dependent on me, right? I can have clients come to me with problems. I tell them what to do, send them on their way. They do it. It works out for them. But what I'm fostering is dependence, right? I foster somebody who is going to come to me for advice on all things. That's bad counseling. A good counselor helps the person figure out their problems, right? Sits with them and says, okay, well, what are your choices? What are the pros and cons? What do you think is going to happen? And what do you think is the best choice? And in that sense, the idea that treating bullying by removing the bully is bad counseling, right? It's one that promotes dependence. You create a bullyee that takes on a victim role, that looks for help from their mommy, daddy, boss, whoever, but basically deals with bullying by tattling. And that's a great tactic in school, but once you get into the real world, you sometimes can't tattle. In fact, you most of the time can't tattle. And that tool becomes useless. So you've created a person who when they're bullied in the future, will not know how to handle it. Now, with respect to Jonathan Martin, you know, you do a little bit of research into his case, and you see basically some of these resilience factors absent. Okay, Jonathan Martin, for those of you who don't know, was raised by a couple of Harvard graduates and basically led a pretty sheltered life. He was again, big, physically big guy, 6'5", 6'6", over 300 pounds. And the NFL linemen of today are not the NFL linemen that you think of from the 80s. These guys are 300 pounds, and they are like athletes. They can run fast, like faster than you. They jump high. I mean, they're guys who are specimens, right? They're the pinnacle of modern sports science, right? So Jonathan Martin, from an early age, was in private school, was again groomed to be this kind of superstar athlete, and he admits in several texts to his mom. I mean, this is a guy who at 20, again, I think it's also important to recognize the age of this young man. He's 24 years old. He's a professional NFL player, and he's living in a city away from his social network, right? One of the things that we talked about as being a factor of resilience is social connection. So he's living isolated, essentially. He also has a history of mood problems, right? He's had some suicide thoughts. He's been depressed. He's a delicate guy to start with. Whenever he has trouble, he sends his mother text messages. He talks to his mommy all the time, right? Mom, I got to get out of here. Mom, I need help. Mom, it would be better if I had a girlfriend who could take my mind off these things. That would be better. Mom, these guys are treating me bad. In one of his texts, he talks about that part of the problem is that he went to soft schools, that he went to schools where he was never challenged, where he was never picked on, and he felt like he was too interested in what other people thought of him. Again, we have a guy who sounds like he was pretty sheltered. Now, I don't know Jonathan Martin. I didn't interview the guy. And maybe what I've read is not a good representation of what he actually went through. I mean, everybody deals with hardship, right? But this is a guy who seems to have been raised in a way where he's not going to be able to handle stress. And it's not surprising that some of the things that he heard wrecked him emotionally. Now, what are some of the things that he was being told? Again, to be specific about the bullying, he was told, you're a rookie, you don't know anything, and if you ever try to do this to me again, I'm gonna smash your face, and it's some sexual stuff. And he was also told that some of the guys were gonna sleep with his sister, and he was made fun of his race because he was biracial. Again, if any of you have played team sports, particularly men, these were common things, right? The new guys always get shit on because it's a pecking order. Again, you're being thrust into an organization, a sports team, where your aggression is fostered. You're supposed to be aggressive. Go get them, guys. Go get them. Smash those guys. Score. The aggression is rewarded because you're trying to achieve a goal, and you have another team that's trying to prevent you from that goal. You need to be aggressive, right? So you end up with these kind of wolf-like hierarchies where the new guys are on the bottom of the totem pole, and the more experienced older guys at the top of the totem pole. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think when you're new at something, you should defer to the expertise of the people that are better at it than you, right? And again, not uncommon in an athletic organization. I don't know about you guys, but I can't remember the last time I played a sport where somebody didn't talk about my mom. Okay? It happens, right? People, they try to get inside your head. They try to pick on you. In this guy's case, they were talking about his sister, and you deal with it, right? Because you come to the conclusion they're not talking about your mom. They're talking about this, hypothetical mom that you have that's fat or a slut or whatever. It's not they don't even know your mom. Okay, so you can't take it personal, and that's one of the defense mechanisms that you develop is you put it into context. You say, is this guy really talking about my mom? Is he really trying to tease me about my family member, or is he just doing a sports thing? And when you come to the conclusion of doing a sports thing, it loses all its power. All right, and again, we have a situation with this guy, Jonathan Martin, where they told him that they were going to sleep with his sister. Why? Because they wanted to make him feel bad. So the end of the story is that Jonathan Martin made formal complaints, and the guys who were the perpetrators or the teasers or the bullies got some suspensions and some consequences and stuff like that. I also think he's off the team. I'm not sure. I don't have the article in front of me, and I'm not going to stop recording to go check it out. But Is this the best way it could have been handled? I don't think so. Certainly the guys who teased this guy were wrong and mean to him, but not drastically wrong. I don't think that what they were doing represented something that doesn't happen in NFL and even high school locker rooms all the time. I don't think that they represent a deviation or some kind of antisocial, sociopathic behavior that needs to be checked. I think that they were behaving in ways that athletes have behaved, since the dawn of time, since the beginning of organized sports. I think that the real solution here is not to protect Jonathan Martin, but to shore him up, right? I mean, I understand that he started some psychiatric treatment and is being treated, but this guy's going to go forward, and unless he learns how to defend himself, he's just not going to be successful. He's not going to have the ability to defend himself against people that pick on him again. And folks, believe it or not, and we don't like to admit this lots of times because we stand upright and we eat with utensils and we wear clothes, but we're animals. Human beings are animals, and some animals prey on other animals, on other human beings, and when there's blood in the water, when they feel weakness or sense weakness, they pounce on it. And this guy, although, again, physically, probably nobody's going to mess with him because he's a monster physically, when they see that he's soft, they're going to take advantage of him. So, from a counseling standpoint, from an ethical standpoint, I don't think that bullying is the problem. I think bullying is a normal part of life. It's a part of life that every one of us has experienced. I'm willing to bet it's a part of life that every one of us has participated in. Okay? I know for a fact, although as a child I always thought of myself as the bullyee, I was at a family gathering recently, and one of my female cousins told me that I bullied her when we would have family gatherings, and I was floored by that. I felt awful. I didn't realize at the time that what I thought was roughhousing. I thought we were just playing, but I didn't realize that I was much older than her. Not much older, 3 or 4 years older, but also larger physically, and I was hurting her. I didn't realize it, and I felt bad. Okay, so I'm not saying that bullies are necessarily all bad people. I've been one, apparently, or obviously, I've been told. But what I'm saying is that this is a part of life that doesn't go away. In school, in work, it doesn't go away. We all have to deal with adversity and deal with pain and deal with people taking advantage of a power differential between them and us, whether it's physical or organizational or whatever. We're going to have it. So the idea of treating it by making that go away is one that I think is unethical. I think it's one that promotes dependence. It promotes weakness and softness, and that doesn't have any place in the real world. I think that the appropriate way to manage bullying is not to make the bullying go away, but to strengthen the person that's being bullied. Again, does that mean counseling? Sure. If you're being distressed by somebody at your school, at your work, your suffering is real, and you should get help with that. I'm not passing judgment on you. I think that if people are awful and can be cruel and make you feel like shit, and you should get some help with that. But I think if you're looking for the help to make that person go away, that's not the help you need. I think the help you need is to teach you how to manage that, to give you the coping skills. Another part of my job is that people come to me and they say, I have no coping skills. I want to work on my coping skills. And I hear this a lot with people that are in recovery, because when people start their recovery, what they do is they throw away their number one coping skill, which is to get high, right? So people, think about, I'm going to go on a little tangent here, but somebody who gets high uses that as a coping strategy for everything. So I feel sad, I get high. I feel happy, I get high. I'm bored, I get high, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the biggest triggers to relapse is not knowing how to deal with all of these new situations, right? So I am sitting around, I have nothing to do. I would have gotten high now, but I can't. So what do? And, I have to learn how to be bored. Or, I'm fighting with my wife, and I used to just go drink and forget about her for a couple of hours, and now I'm clean and sober, and I can't. So now I have to learn how to deal with this fight. And what people come to me and what they say is, I want to learn how to cope. What they're saying to me in reality is, I don't want to feel this discomfort. But coping is dealing with discomfort with the understanding that the discomfort is not permanent. Okay? So when people are being bullied, the coping strategy is to notice the discomfort, be mindful of it, put it into context, do all the things that my mom would tell me when she was brushing my hair into a big brown cotton ball, and then sending me to school to be tormented by the kids, which at the time felt like crap, but now, Mom, thank you. You did me a great service. But essentially, you're more important than the bullying. The things that they're saying are either true or not true. If they're true, do something about it. If they're not true, then throw it in the garbage. It's meaningless. And think about the person. Is that person so important to you that what they're saying should make you feel bad? All right, guys. I did this podcast because I had a lot of thoughts on the issue, and I found myself having like an internal dialogue where the professional me and the meathead New York Italian me were fighting, and I think when I processed it, I got them to agree, and now I can move forward and hopefully be a better counselor to my clients. So, guys, thank you so much for listening. Now, once again, if you're being bullied and you listen to this because you're looking for tips, that's not what this podcast is for. This podcast is for entertainment and for information. If you need help, please Google search community mental health in your area, or if you have health insurance, your health insurance can give you a provider, or you can go to samhsa.gov, SAMHSA.gov. It's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.gov, and right on the front page there is find a provider. So get there, get some help if you need it. It can only help you, can only make you feel better. And if you enjoyed this podcast, or if you have any questions, because I do rely on your questions for my material, you can follow me on Twitter at breakdownswithg. You can go to my Tumblr page and follow me on Tumblr, breakdownswithg.tumblr.com. I have an email address. It's breakdownswithg@gmail.com. Or you can subscribe to my YouTube page, Breakdowns with G, or you can get this thing off of iTunes or Stitcher and subscribe. I like to see my download numbers go up. I don't make any money off this thing, and I don't market. So if you share it, you're doing me a great favor. I appreciate it. And thank you, guys. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed it.